In Arizona, authorities say the DNA submitted to the FBI during the search for Nancy Guthrie over the past month has not produced any matches. However, investigators have not given up hope. Earlier, the FBI discovered DNA on a black glove found near Nancy Guthrie's home. Notably, the glove appears similar to the one worn by a mysterious individual captured in a chilling doorbell camera video recorded shortly before Nancy disappeared. This discovery has made the case even more puzzling, as the identity of the person seen in the footage remains unknown, raising more questions and continuing to draw intense public attention to the investigation. The DNA collected from inside the house and from the black glove was submitted to the FBI's national database for analysis. Investigators once hoped it would provide a crucial breakthrough, but the results showed no match among the roughly 22 million samples on record. Authorities admit they hesitate to say the case is back at square one. Yet the investigation has made only minimal progress so far. This disappointing development comes 42 days after the 84-year-old mother of Today host Savannah Guthrie was abducted from her Tucson home, leaving a haunting question that the public has been waiting weeks to have answered. Where is Nancy Guthrie? She is 84 years old, a mother, a grandmother, someone who should be safe in her own home. Yet on February 1, 2026, she suddenly vanished from her house in the Tucson area. Investigators say she did not leave on her own. At the scene, they discovered troubling signs and even found traces of her blood on the porch, quickly turning the location into a potential crime scene. Then a piece of porch camera footage surfaced, and the fear surrounding the case deepened. The video shows a figure outside her home in the dark, face covered, wearing gloves, and carrying a backpack. This was not a neighbor or a confused visitor, but someone moving with clear intent. From the moment that footage was seen, everything changed. Because when a masked person appears at the door of an elderly woman's home, people stop thinking about a simple disappearance and begin to fear something far more serious: an abduction. As the investigation continued, the questions grew more urgent. Who did this, and how were they able to get so close? Police launched an extensive search, the FBI joined the case, and tips flooded in from across the country. Everyone was hoping for one clear answer: proof that Nancy Guthrie was still alive. But the case kept offering small clues, only to leave investigators with more uncertainty. At one point, a glove was discovered about 2 miles away, similar to the one worn by the masked figure seen on camera. It even contained DNA, raising hopes that the suspect could finally be identified. Yet when the sample was tested against Cody's, the national DNA database, it failed to match any profile. What seemed like the strongest leads still produced no name, while time continued to pass and concern grew, especially since Nancy had been taken without her essential medication. As speculation spreads, strangers online begin forming theories and pointing fingers. But authorities have made one thing clear: the Guthrie family, including relatives and spouses, has been ruled out as suspects. That leaves one haunting question: who is the masked figure seen outside Nancy Guthrie's home? Someone who approached the porch with purpose, prepared and unnoticed. Investigators believe the video may hold the key. Someone in the community might recognize the person by the way they move, dress, or carry themselves. While the public waits for answers, authorities continue searching from the ground and the air, using specialized technology to track electronic and medical signals. Now the focus turns to the known facts: the timeline, the disturbing footage, and the glove that produced DNA but no match. And as pressure grows, one question lingers: if someone out there knows the truth, what is keeping them silent? Because in a case like this, silence is rarely meaningless. It is a decision. Eventually, silence has a way of breaking. But in this case, it didn't happen with a dramatic arrest or a shocking announcement from police. Instead, the shift came quietly, yet it carried just as much weight. In a case watched by the entire country, even a single voice speaking out can change the atmosphere. After the porch camera footage was released, the pressure intensified. The image of the masked figure was replayed again and again on television. Slowed down, zoomed in, enhanced, but still no clear face, no identity, only a shadow moving through the night. As days passed without answers, questions spread to everyone connected to Nancy. Friends, neighbors, workers, even extended family found themselves under public scrutiny. It's something that often happens in missing person cases. When the truth remains hidden, suspicion begins to drift outward, and soon the family stands in the center of the storm. The family was already dealing with fear, exhaustion, and grief, while online accusations continued to grow. As speculation intensified, Nancy's son-in-law chose to speak publicly for the first time. He didn't step forward to confess or reveal new details, but simply to address the rising noise surrounding the case. Standing briefly outside his home with his lawyer beside him, he faced cameras and shouted questions from reporters. Raising his hand calmly, he delivered a short statement. He had nothing to hide, he cared deeply about Nancy, and the family was praying for a safe return. The message was brief, cautious, and deliberate. By that point, rumors online had already begun focusing on small details. Who was last at the house? Who had access? Who handled certain responsibilities? Yet investigators had already clarified something important. The Guthrie family, including spouses, had been ruled out as suspects. Even so, in the world of social media, once rumors begin, they rarely disappear so easily. Instead of fading, the rumors continued to grow and shift. The son-in-law's statement was calm and brief, not dramatic, but in a case surrounded by uncertainty, even a few words carried weight. Still, the public kept demanding more details, more answers, and most of all, for Nancy to be found. While attention focused on the family, investigators continued their work quietly behind the scenes. The porch camera footage remained the most powerful clue released to the public. It showed a masked figure wearing gloves and carrying a backpack, moving toward the house with clear intent. There was no sign of panic or hesitation, something investigators found unusual. The person appeared organized and prepared. Hopes briefly rose when a glove discovered about 2 miles away seemed similar to the one seen in the video. It even contained DNA, suggesting a possible breakthrough. But when the sample was entered into CODIS, the national DNA database, it produced no match, no criminal record, no known identity, nothing. Investigators realized the DNA result likely meant one thing. The suspect had either never been arrested or their DNA had never been entered into any database, making identification far more difficult. As the search widened, drones scanned the desert terrain, helicopters swept low across the area, and volunteers formed lines across dry fields looking for any sign of Nancy. The urgency was clear. Authorities confirmed Nancy had not left willingly and that she was missing important medication, making every passing hour critical. In an effort to find new leads, specialists even turned to unusual technology. One former Marine built a device designed to detect Bluetooth signals from electronics, hoping that if Nancy's pacemaker was still active, it might send out a detectable signal. While investigators searched, the community rallied around the case. Volunteers joined search teams, churches organized prayer vigils, and strangers placed flowers outside Nancy's home. Her name began appearing on national news, not because she wanted attention, but because her disappearance had captured the concern of an entire country. Investigators repeatedly returned to one critical point: the timeline. On the evening of February 1st, everything seemed normal until security footage captured a masked figure on Nancy's porch. The video was recorded before she was officially reported missing, suggesting the person's presence was not random but directly connected to what happened that night. Our authorities closely studied the individual's movements. Experts analyzed the way the person walked, hoping gait patterns might reveal clues about identity, height, or build. They also examined the backpack seen in the footage, questioning whether it was ordinary or possibly carried tools or other items, though officials chose not to share those details publicly. Inside Nancy's home, evidence indicated she did not leave willingly. Still, investigators remained careful about what they revealed, knowing that releasing too much information could damage the case, while revealing too little could frustrate the public. Throughout it all, the family continued cooperating with authorities as the search went on. Savannah Guthrie publicly thanked law enforcement and asked both for privacy and for anyone with information to come forward. She avoided accusations or speculation, keeping the focus on one goal: finding her mother. Investigators also worked to keep the case from turning into pure media spectacle, continuing their efforts quietly behind the scenes. Detectives revisited the neighborhood, collecting doorbell footage, reviewing traffic cameras, and documenting vehicles that passed near the home that night. Thousands of tips poured in, some helpful, many not, but each one had to be examined carefully, because even the smallest detail could change the direction of the case. As weeks passed, authorities confirmed another troubling detail. Evidence found on Nancy's porch indicated signs of injury, including traces of blood. While full forensic details were not released, the discovery strengthened what many had already feared. This was not a simple disappearance, but likely a crime, bringing renewed attention back to the masked figure seen on camera. Investigators urged the public to watch the porch footage closely, not for a face, since it was hidden, but for the person's movements, posture, and the way the backpack rested on their shoulders. Sometimes recognition comes from small habits. A friend might notice a walk, a family member might recognize a familiar stance. So far, however, no confirmed identification has been announced. Authorities have not ruled out several possibilities. The masked individual may have acted alone, may have known details about the home, or may have been watching beforehand. In crimes involving elderly victims, investigators often consider patterns such as scams, financial targeting, or opportunistic offenders. Yet one key piece remains missing: the motive. Why Nancy? Why that night? And why that home? Was she specifically targeted, or was it random? And if it was planned, how did the suspect know enough to arrive prepared? These are the questions investigators are still trying to answer. After delivering his brief public statement, Nancy's son-in-law chose not to give further interviews. The decision sparked mixed reactions. Some believed staying quiet was the right move, while others felt more openness was needed. However, in active investigations, those close to a case are often advised to speak cautiously, since statements can easily be misinterpreted or turned into misleading headlines. Behind the scenes, investigators have been focusing on more concrete evidence. One effort involves analyzing data from nearby cell towers to identify phones that connected in the area during the critical time window. While many belong to residents or passing drivers, unidentified devices are being carefully flagged and reviewed. Authorities are also paying close attention to the backpack seen in the porch footage. Enhanced images were released to the public, and stores in the region were contacted to see if anyone had recently purchased a similar bag, especially using cash. So far, however, investigators have not announced any confirmed breakthroughs. The glove discovered 2 miles away remains one of the most puzzling clues. It looked similar to the one worn by the masked figure, and it carried DNA, yet the sample produced no match in national records. That could mean the suspect has never been arrested before, making the search far more difficult. The porch camera revealed someone standing at Nancy's door, but it left many questions unanswered. It does not show what happened inside the house, where Nancy went afterward, or what unfolded once the footage ended. It only confirms that someone was there, and that person has still not been identified. As investigators continue piecing together the timeline of that night, one truth remains clear. Nancy is not just a headline or a case file. She is an 84-year-old woman whose family is still waiting for answers. And until those answers are found, this investigation is far from over. When investigators say a case is active, it means they are carefully building the truth piece by piece. After the porch footage of the masked figure surfaced, detectives focused on a key question: was this a random act or something carefully planned? The answer could reveal whether Nancy was specifically targeted or simply became a victim of opportunity. To find clues, investigators reconstructed Nancy's entire day on February 1st. Her phone records showed normal activity that morning, a few calls to friends and a short conversation with someone from her church. Nothing suggested trouble. Her car also remained in the driveway throughout the afternoon. As evening approached, neighbors noticed lights on inside the house, the usual glow of television and kitchen lights. Everything appeared normal. But when detectives began reviewing nearby traffic camera footage, they noticed something that drew their attention and raised new questions. During the timeline review, investigators noticed another unusual detail. A dark-colored vehicle passed Nancy's home 3 times within about 40 minutes. Each time it moved slowly, circling the area without stopping. The license plate could not be fully read because of glare, and police have not confirmed whether it is connected, but repeated passes like that rarely go unnoticed. At 7:45 p.m., a nearby doorbell camera captured faint movement along the sidewalk, not clear enough for identification, but consistent with someone heading toward Nancy's property. Then, around 8 p.m., the masked figure appears clearly in the porch footage, wearing gloves and carrying a backpack, approaching the door without hesitation. The video does not show any forced entry, raising a troubling possibility. Nancy may have opened the door herself. Investigators have not confirmed signs of a break-in, and in cases involving elderly victims, deception is sometimes used. Yet the backpack and gloves suggest preparation, pointing to someone who may have arrived with a specific plan. Authorities have confirmed that evidence inside the home suggests Nancy did not leave on her own. Blood found on the porch supports that concern, though investigators have released few additional details to avoid harming the case. What stands out most is the suspect's behavior in the footage: calm, controlled, and unhurried. The masked figure did not appear nervous or rushed while approaching the door. That level of confidence raised another possibility: familiarity. Someone who had observed the home before. Detectives returned to the neighborhood, asking residents if they had noticed anything unusual in the days leading up to the disappearance. Some neighbors mentioned seeing a person jogging past the house several evenings earlier, though it remains unclear if that detail is connected. Meanwhile, forensic teams continued examining the home, collecting fibers, documenting shoe impressions, and swabbing surfaces for evidence. Even the smallest trace from the porch could become a crucial clue. Investigators say the blood evidence on the porch is important not only because it exists, but because of where it was found. The pattern could help determine whether the injury happened outside the door or if it began inside and moved outward. While officials have not released full forensic details, they have made one point clear: this was not a simple disappearance. Detectives have also turned to technology for answers. One key method is cell tower analysis. Every mobile phone constantly connects to nearby towers, even when no calls are being made. By requesting a tower dump, investigators can collect the numbers of all devices that connected to a specific tower during a certain time frame. This process can generate hundreds or even thousands of numbers, most belonging to ordinary residents or passing drivers. But hidden within that data, unusual patterns sometimes appear. Phones that show up only once, devices moving in strange ways, or signals that match the timing of the masked figure. Sorting through that information can take weeks, but it can also reveal critical leads. Accessing cell tower data requires court approval, technical filtering, and expert analysis, but it can reveal who was near the scene at critical moments. Investigators also reviewed Nancy's own phone activity, including her last calls, app usage, and final screen unlock. Even the absence of activity can help investigators understand when something may have gone wrong. The glove discovered 2 miles away remains under examination. Although the DNA found on it did not match any profile in Cody's, that does not mean the evidence is useless. If a suspect is identified later or if new DNA profiles are added to the system, the sample could still become a key breakthrough. Attention has also focused on the backpack seen in the porch footage. While people online have tried to guess the brand by studying images, investigators rely on enhanced forensic analysis rather than speculation. Another factor detectives are considering is physical capability. Nancy was 84 years old, which raises questions about the strength or planning required to carry out the crime. Investigators are also asking how Nancy may have been moved if she was taken from the home. Was she forced to walk, carried, or placed into a nearby vehicle? To answer that, detectives are reviewing traffic camera footage minute by minute, studying every SUV, van, or car that appeared in the area longer than expected. Small patterns in those movements could reveal critical clues. As the investigation continues, the emotional strain on the family has only grown. They are dealing with fear and grief while also facing public speculation. Authorities have made an important point clear: the Guthrie family, including spouses, has been officially cleared as suspects. Such statements are not made lightly and indicate that evidence does not point toward family involvement. Even so, rumors online continue to spread. Meanwhile, the community has remained active in supporting the search. Volunteers keep organizing efforts, posters are still visible across the area, Hotline numbers continue circulating, and tips, some minor, some urgent, are still reaching investigators. Investigators continue to log every tip that comes in, no matter how small. Even minor details, someone changing clothes in a parking lot, a vehicle being cleaned, or a discarded backpack, could become an important lead. What remains clear is that the masked figure captured on camera is real, moving with purpose and closely tied to the timeline of Nancy's disappearance. And yet detectives believe that figure may represent only one part of a larger sequence of events. Crimes like this rarely begin and end in a single moment. There are actions leading up to it and movements afterward. The next stage of the investigation will focus more deeply on forensic evidence from inside the home and what the blood patterns may reveal. By the third week, the case had entered a new phase. While search efforts and public attention continued, forensic teams were working behind the scenes, carefully examining evidence in hopes that the smallest detail could bring investigators closer to the truth. By this stage, the investigation had moved into the quiet phase most people never see, the careful work inside forensic labs. While the public waits for answers, specialists focus on evidence. Inside Nancy's home, crime scene technicians concentrated on three main areas: the porch, the entryway, and the floor patterns inside the house. The blood discovered at the scene was not only tested for DNA, which confirmed it belonged to Nancy, but also examined for its pattern. Blood pattern analysis can reveal whether someone was standing, falling, or being moved. The size, direction, and shape of the droplets can help reconstruct what happened. According to information connected to the case, investigators did not find signs of a large, chaotic struggle. There were no overturned furniture pieces or widespread damage across the home. Instead, the evidence appeared more contained, suggesting whatever happened may have occurred quickly and within a limited area. Investigators also studied the doorway closely, trying to determine whether Nancy was injured inside the home and later moved toward the porch. The threshold area was examined in detail. Fibers were collected, shoe impressions were documented, and even small particles of dirt were analyzed. One observation raised concern. Parts of the porch surface appeared to have been partially wiped, as if someone had tried to clean a small area quickly. Inside the home, the scene looked unusually calm. The living room showed no major signs of struggle. Nancy's television remote sat on a nearby table, and her reading glasses were left in place, suggesting she had not left in a sudden rush. This reinforced investigators' belief that she did not leave by choice. The detectives also checked the door locks and entry points. There were no confirmed signs of forced entry, no broken locks or damaged door frames. That detail narrowed the possibilities, suggesting the masked person may have entered only after the door was opened. With no sign of forced entry, investigators believe one of two things likely happened. Either the door was unlocked, or Nancy opened it herself. That possibility raises concerns about deception, a tactic sometimes used against elderly victims through fake deliveries or service visits. However, the suspect's mask and gloves suggest they intended to conceal their identity from the start. The detectives then studied the porch footage frame by frame, tracing the masked individual's movement from the sidewalk to the door. The person did not appear nervous or hesitant. They moved steadily, without repeatedly scanning the area for witnesses or reacting to passing vehicles. That calm behavior suggested either confidence or familiarity with the situation. Investigators also focused on the backpack seen in the video. Although it was never recovered, its size indicated it could have carried tools or other equipment, suggesting it served a practical purpose rather than being simply an accessory. Investigators believe the backpack seen in the footage suggests planning rather than coincidence. At the same time, digital forensic experts carefully analyzed Nancy's phone. They reviewed screen activity, app usage, location data, and battery levels. The device showed its final activity shortly before the masked figure appeared at the porch, and after that moment, everything went silent. There were no emergency calls or last messages. That silence is important because people often reach for their phones when they feel threatened. Its absence suggests events may have happened quickly, or that Nancy was unable to access her device. Landline records were also checked, and no calls for help were made from the house during that time. Investigators also returned to the glove found 2 miles away. Forensic teams tested it for trace materials such as sand, pollen, and fibers, comparing them with samples from Nancy's yard and home. The DNA recovered from the gloves still has no match in Cody's, leaving the identity of the person who wore it unknown. The lack of a DNA match suggests something important to investigators. The suspect may not have a prior record requiring DNA submission. This could point to a first-time offender or someone who has managed to avoid detection in the past. Because of that, detectives have expanded their search beyond known criminals. Interviews across the community have intensified. Neighbors were asked detailed questions about anything unusual: a car parked late at night, someone discarding clothing, or even a strange sound in the distance. Memories may be imperfect, but sometimes one small observation can become a crucial lead. Investigators have also reviewed Nancy's recent financial activity. This step is common in cases involving elderly victims, where financial targeting can sometimes play a role. Authorities have already stated that the family is not suspected, but detectives are still checking for unusual withdrawals, transfers, or disputes. So far, no confirmed financial motive has been announced. Investigators are now focused on a critical question: was Nancy deliberately targeted, or was she chosen because she appeared vulnerable? If the crime was planned, the suspect may have known her routine or observed the house beforehand. Detectives are reviewing traffic camera footage from the days leading up to February 1st, identifying vehicles that repeatedly passed through the area. License plates, even those from out of state, are being tracked and compared for patterns. This type of analysis takes time, but repeated movements can reveal important clues about someone watching the neighborhood. Investigators are also considering environmental factors. The night Nancy disappeared was cool and dry, conditions that can preserve certain forms of evidence. Footwear impressions on soil, for example, may last longer in dry air. If such prints were captured and documented, they could eventually be compared with a suspect's shoes, once a suspect is identified. A technology continues to assist investigators, yet Nancy's location remains unknown and the case is still open. As the investigation entered its fourth week, detectives began widening their perspective. When answers don't come quickly, investigators often step back and examine the broader picture. Instead of focusing only on the house and porch, attention shifted to geography and movement patterns. Detectives began asking larger questions. If someone came to Nancy's home that night, where did they come from, and where did they go afterward? Because in most cases, people do not appear or vanish without leaving some kind of trail. The area around Nancy's home in Tucson includes quiet residential streets and stretches of open desert that become darker the farther they extend. That landscape plays an important role in criminal behavior. Investigators have started developing what is known as a geographic profile, mapping movements and locations that might reveal where the suspect came from and where they may have gone next. Investigators are using geographic profiling to understand how the suspect may have approached and left the area. If the masked individual arrived on foot, it could suggest they lived nearby. If they came by vehicle, it might point to planning and preparation. Detectives also considered whether a car may have been parked out of sight before the approach. Traffic cameras in surrounding streets were reviewed again, not only from the night of February 1st but from the entire week before. During that review, one detail drew attention: a dark sedan seen passing through the area several times during evening hours. The vehicle did not belong to any nearby resident and was occasionally observed slowing down or briefly stopping near the end of the block. Authorities have not confirmed whether the sedan is connected to the case, but the pattern is being carefully analyzed. Investigators are attempting to enhance the license plate image, hoping even partial numbers could narrow the search. At the same time, analysts are mapping cell tower data from that night, layering phone signals over digital maps to identify devices that may not belong to residents. Among the phone signals detected that night, most belonged to residents or passing drivers. However, a few devices appeared briefly in the area and were never seen there again. Those signals are now under closer review. To identify the owners, investigators must obtain legal warrants, a process that takes time. Still, cell data can be powerful evidence. Even if a suspect hides their face, their phone may still reveal their presence. Detectives have also begun checking online marketplaces and digital activity. They are looking for anyone who may have sold a similar backpack after February 1st, discarded clothing online, or searched for ways to remove surveillance footage. After a crime, online searches and posts can sometimes expose behavior that raises suspicion. And meanwhile, the glove discovered 2 miles away continues to raise questions. That distance suggests the suspect moved away from the home after the incident. 2 miles could be walked in less than an hour or driven in just a few minutes. Investigators are now asking whether the glove was deliberately discarded to hide evidence, or simply dropped in a moment of haste. Investigators even reviewed weather conditions from that night, including wind patterns, to determine whether the glove found 2 miles away could have been moved naturally. Early analysis suggests that is unlikely. Its weight and location point more toward deliberate disposal. The spot where it was discovered is near a network of small desert paths, areas used occasionally by hikers, dog walkers, and off-road vehicles, a place someone familiar with the area might know. Detectives have also expanded the timeline of the investigation. Between 6 p.m. and midnight on February 1st, they are reconstructing movements across roughly a 2-mile radius. Surveillance from doorbell cameras, gas stations, stores, and ATMs is being reviewed carefully to track possible activity before or after the crime. Investigators are also examining transaction records in the surrounding area, looking for unusual purchases such as gloves or masks in the days leading up to the incident. This process is slow but thorough. Meanwhile, members of the community continue assisting in search efforts, walking across open land in hopes that some overlooked clue might still be found. Posters with Nancy's photo still hang at intersections across the city, keeping her case in the public eye. That kind of visibility can create pressure on a suspect, especially when media attention refuses to fade. With the FBI involved, the investigation has expanded, bringing additional resources, deeper data analysis, and consultation with behavioral experts. According to behavioral analysts, offenders who approach elderly homes while masked often fall into 2 categories: opportunistic burglars or individuals who planned the encounter. In this case, the gloves, mask, and backpack seen in the footage suggest a level of preparation, indicating the suspect likely intended to conceal their identity and possibly carry tools. Even so, preparation does not explain motive. Investigators have not publicly identified why Nancy may have been targeted, whether for financial reasons, random violence, or something more personal. Authorities have also reaffirmed that Nancy's immediate family, including spouses, are not considered suspects, allowing investigators to keep their focus on leads beyond the family circle. Investigators continue focusing strictly on evidence. Forensic teams are analyzing trace materials collected from Nancy's property, including tiny fibers near the entrance, dust from the porch surface, and even microscopic paint fragments. If the suspect brushed against a vehicle or object before arriving, those particles could have transferred and may eventually help identify a source. Specialists are also studying the practical details of the crime. By estimating Nancy's weight and the possible contents of the suspect's backpack, investigators are calculating whether a single person could have moved her alone and how quickly it could have been done. These are not guesses, but careful measurements based on physical possibility and timeline analysis. The suspect's calm behavior in the porch footage also raises important questions. Moving without hesitation may indicate confidence or familiarity with the environment. Detectives are considering the possibility that the individual observed the home beforehand, learning Nancy's routine, when lights were on, when she was alone, and when the neighborhood was quiet. Detectives have asked neighbors to recall anything unusual in the days before the incident. Someone sitting in a parked car for long periods, taking photos, or lingering nearby while appearing to check a phone. Several tips have been reported, though none have been confirmed yet. Even so, each observation is documented as investigators widen the search beyond Tucson's immediate area. Authorities are also reviewing highway patrol camera footage, tracking vehicles that left the city late that night. Particular attention is being given to routes that could connect the home to the area where the glove was found 2 miles away. Mapping software helps analysts narrow possible paths, since offenders often rely on roads they already know rather than random routes. At the same time, Detectives are comparing this case with other recent incidents involving suspicious activity near elderly residents. So far, no direct connection has been publicly confirmed. Meanwhile, investigators continue studying the timeline, the porch camera timestamp, Nancy's last known activity, and the gap before her disappearance was reported the following morning. Investigators are carefully comparing every minute of the timeline with available data. Some neighbors have reported small but potentially important details. One person recalled hearing a car door slam around 8:20 p.m., while another believed they heard a raised voice. Individual memories can be uncertain, but when multiple accounts begin to align, they can strengthen the investigation. Our authorities remain cautious about what they share publicly. Revealing too much could warn a suspect about what detectives already know. Behind the scenes, however, the investigation continues to evolve. Geographic profiling is becoming more precise, cell phone data is being filtered, and traffic patterns are being analyzed more closely. What remains clear is that the suspect did not simply disappear. Whoever was involved had to leave the area, travel somewhere, and potentially leave traces along the way. As investigators continue studying the wider map of Tucson, they are working toward a point where digital evidence, behavioral analysis, and geographic patterns may finally connect, and when they do, the case could take a decisive turn. As the investigation progressed, detectives reached what they call a convergence point, when separate lines of inquiry begin to connect. Digital data, geographic analysis, witness reports, and behavioral patterns were all being examined together. While the masked figure remained the most visible clue to the public, investigators were quietly studying movement patterns behind the scenes. And when analysts overlaid cell tower data with nearby traffic camera records, one detail stood out. An unidentified phone briefly connected to a tower less than half a mile from Nancy's home shortly before the porch footage was recorded. On its own, that would not be unusual. However, the same device later connected again about 2 miles away, near the location where the glove was eventually discovered, before the signal disappeared entirely. The phone had not appeared in tower logs in that area before and showed no further activity afterward. While that does not prove involvement, it gave investigators a new lead, prompting them to obtain a warrant to identify the subscriber connected to the number. Investigators soon discovered that the phone linked to the unusual tower activity was a prepaid device, registered under a false name and purchased with cash. That detail suggested possible planning, since prepaid phones are often used to avoid easy identification. Even so, such devices can still leave traces. Store surveillance, purchase timestamps, and serial numbers tied to the sale location can all help investigators trace where the phone originated. And at the same time, traffic cameras at a nearby intersection revealed another clue. A dark sedan, similar to the one previously seen circling the neighborhood, was recorded passing through the area about 15 minutes after the porch footage was captured. For a brief moment, the vehicle's headlights reflected off what appeared to be a backpack strap visible through the windshield. The driver's face could not be clearly seen, but image enhancement technology improved the view of the license plate. 2 additional digits became readable, significantly narrowing the search. When investigators compared the partial plate with vehicle registration records, they were able to reduce the possibilities to a much smaller group of potential matches. From that point, detectives began conducting quiet background checks. There were no public announcements and no immediate arrests, only careful review. One vehicle owner drew attention, not because of a criminal record, but because the registered address was less than 3 miles from Nancy's home. Phone data also linked that location to the store where the prepaid device had been purchased 2 weeks before February 1st. While that connection did not prove involvement, it raised enough concern for investigators to begin discreet surveillance. Detectives monitored daily routines, vehicle use, and even trash disposal. In some cases, discarded items can reveal important clues such as packaging, receipts, or clothing fibers. After obtaining a search warrant, investigators reportedly found clothing similar to what appeared in the porch footage, along with gloves resembling the one discovered earlier. More importantly, trace soil particles recovered from the property are now being compared with samples collected from Nancy's porch. If the lab confirms a match, it could establish a critical physical link in the case. Meanwhile, Nancy's family continues to wait as updates from authorities grow more cautious while the investigation narrows. Investigators remained careful not to alert the possible suspect too early. Revealing too much could push someone to flee or destroy evidence. But outside the investigation, pressure from the community continued to build. People wanted answers. They wanted justice, and most of all, they wanted Nancy found. Detectives also revisited the suspect's behavior. The calm, steady movement seen in the porch footage no longer looked random. It suggested familiarity, perhaps someone who knew the area well. If the suspect lived nearby, the confidence made more sense. Familiar streets reduce hesitation. Or another detail began to strengthen that theory. License plate reader data from a shopping center captured the same dark sedan entering the lot about 30 minutes after the porch footage. The driver stayed inside the vehicle for nearly 10 minutes, then left without entering any store. On its own, that might mean little. But when combined with earlier sightings of the same car slowly passing Nancy's street several evenings before the disappearance, investigators began to see a pattern forming. The repeated appearances of that vehicle suggested something more deliberate than coincidence. Investigators began considering the possibility that Nancy's home had been observed beforehand. If that was true, the question became unavoidable: why her house? Detectives started reviewing recent contacts, delivery drivers, repair workers, contractors, anyone who might have learned the layout or noticed her routine. At the same time, forensic work continued behind the scenes. The glove recovered earlier still produced no direct match in Cody's, but analysts began exploring familial DNA searches. This technique looks for partial genetic links that could point toward relatives of the unknown individual. It requires strict legal approval, yet it has helped solve cases where suspects had never submitted DNA themselves. And now the investigation sits at a tense turning point. A possible suspect has emerged, a vehicle pattern is forming, a prepaid phone is linked to the timeline, and soil evidence is under laboratory comparison. Piece by piece, the puzzle is tightening, and investigators are moving closer to the truth. Yet the investigation is not finished. Until charges are officially filed and Nancy is located, the story remains unresolved. Behind every piece of evidence, every report, and every analysis is the life of an 84-year-old woman who did not choose to disappear. Her family is still waiting, and the community continues to search for answers. Authorities remind the public that even the smallest observation can matter. A memory, a sighting, a detail that once seemed unimportant could become the key that unlocks the truth. Anyone with information about Nancy Guthrie's disappearance is urged to contact local law enforcement. Cases like this move slowly, but step by step the truth comes closer to the surface. If you believe stories like Nancy's deserve attention until justice is served, continue sharing the information and following the updates. Because the search for answers does not stop until the truth is finally revealed.